there's the primaries, there's a lot of information, there's a lot of candidates. Is there a resource where we can, as people who are relatively uneducated about it, go and say, okay, this is when I can vote for this, and this is who's running? And
so I was talking to a friend of mine in Knoxville, very lovely man, Theodis Robinson Jr. He was actually the first black student at the University of Tennessee, later to become a vice chancellor at UT. And he's writing an article about the Roe decision. And he was asking me about certain legislators in our area, how they voted. And I looked up the bills, and all the Republicans voted for both of the bills. I don't think there was no Republican voted no. In the House, there was one Republican that I saw, Patsy Hazelwood, who did not vote. And that was it. Every other Republican voted to support those bills that I saw. I said no Republican voted no that I saw. And I'll check it again to make sure. But the reality is, if you vote for a Republican in Tennessee, you are voting for women not to be equal. I mean, that's just the way it is. If it's someone who's not been there yet and they tell you something different, they don't know what the pressure's like when they get there, because they have seen. I'm like an example of how somebody can be treated when you go against the grain.
Right.
And not only that, but they're also with a supermajority, the Republicans can stop anybody from passing a bill.
Yeah, I mean.
So they had a list a couple years ago of who was not going to pass a bill. Most of them were Democrats, but there was one Republican who challenged that speaker. And they said he wouldn't pass a bill, and he didn't. So there's retaliation even within their own party if you go against leadership. And they tighten those screws really quickly, and people see it happening. And so even if their conscience tells them one thing, there's no courage to do what's right. Because they're afraid of retaliation. And it's sad to me that I work with cowards like that.
Yeah.
But that's where we are. And we need people who will stand up, and people who will stand up every time. Because if they're not coming for you now, they're coming for you next.
Yeah. To my question about a website or something I can send people to that gives them more general information about who's running and how I feel like there's no collective information.
Right. Well, see, our Knox County party page has everybody who's running in the county and everybody who's running in the state elections and even statewide elections. So your county party website, County Democratic Party website, has a lot of that. The election commission has who's on the ballot, but it doesn't give you any information.
Right.
You've got to find that information on your own. So unfortunately, there's not a lot of great websites. And I get really discouraged. For me, I think something that's really important for people in Tennessee to understand is, to my knowledge, as far as elected Republicans in the state legislature, not a single one has come out against the big lie and against the insurrection. One even attended the insurrection. So that's the one who sang the national anthem that I took a knee for.
Well, when we're not on camera, I've got to hear about that.
And so we need journalists asking them, do you believe that there should be absolutely no abortion except life of the mother? Do you think a 12-year-old should be forced to bear her uncle's child?
I saw something on Twitter that really frustrated me. It was someone who was pretty far right, and they were saying, we keep using the uncle raping the little girl and all these things as a reference. These things aren't happening every day. Let me be clear, they are happening every day. That's why the fucking Me Too movement exists, because we are constantly sexually assaulted by family members, by people in the church, by people at bars. This is an epidemic, and that is where that movement came from. So this idea that it's these one-off things that are happening that we're referencing for why abortion should remain legal, it's not one-off, baby. It's all the time.
Absolutely. And the thing that is really just should be so crushing to every woman in this country, and certainly every woman in Tennessee, In Tennessee, our elected officials give more rights to a violent rapist. They let a violent rapist choose the mother of their child. They do not let the victim of a violent rapist choose whether or not to have that rapist baby. That is sick and twisted. It's evil.
Yeah, that's the other thing too. Like, I find that that same group of people references abortions as if it's like going shopping at the mall. And abortion is incredibly painful. Think of how hard it was for you guys to wear masks. And abortion is much harder. So we're not casually sleeping around and going, I think I'll have another abortion.
Yeah.
It's not a quick fix. As a country artist references it in her song, she's very anti-choice. And she calls an abortion a quick fix. And that's such dangerous rhetoric because it's an incredibly harrowing experience. We're doing it when we have to do it. And trust me, we don't want to do it. But there are situations where we have to, and we should have the ability
Absolutely.
to do it.
And that woman should have the decision of what that reason is and all of those things. It's pretty harrowing, decision to make, but and they act as if, women regret it later and all that stuff. The women I know don't have those regrets. But the thing that's so discouraging about Tennessee, all of the things that we know based in research and data that prevent unwanted pregnancies, easy access to birth control, age-appropriate sex education, and health care for women. We won't allow any of those three, not one. So they don't want to reduce unwanted pregnancies. I mean, like a person like me in a situation, I've always had health care because as a teacher, I had access to health care. I have a condition that would make it near impossible for me to survive a pregnancy. So I was able to make the decision and have insurance to have my tubes tied. Mm-hmm. And there are so many women out there who don't have that as a choice. It is ludicrous that you want to say you care about birth and you care about fetuses, but you will do nothing to help women make sure they don't get in that situation.
Right.
Zero.
You'll do the opposite, if anything.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, sure. Because if we teach abstinence in school, then kids will be abstinent.
Get out of here.
I remember sitting around with my mom, who is from Farmtown, Illinois, and all of her friends, and they're in their 80s, and took my mom for a class reunion up there to hang out with all of them, and I'm sitting there with, it was just fascinating to hear them talk about, their school. I think they had a high school class of something like 25 or something like that. But in the conversation, I can't tell you how many times they said, and this was in, it's rural kind of farm-town Illinois, not too far, probably an hour and a half from St. Louis. And during the conversation, so-and-so, she went to St. Louis during high school. And then somebody else, she went to St. Louis. I was like, afterwards, Mom, what was this going to St. Louis? And going to St. Louis was if you got pregnant in high school. It was happening then.
It's always been happening.
Right. And so to act as if not talking about it and not teaching how to prevent it and all of those things is ignorant. You are ignorant. And that's why we see red states with more abortions.
Right. And that brings me to my next point of concern, which is the foster care system and the lives that are already in existence in our country, because those lives seem to be of very little concern, which is why the fascination with a fetus is so bizarre, and also not in the Bible. What's happening right now in the state of Tennessee as it relates to the children in the foster care system, the children that do get born but end up...
It's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
I haven't checked the numbers in the last couple of months since we were in session, but when we were in ending session, 25% of the employees had left Department of Children's Services. they had caseloads in Davidson County of up to 90. In East Tennessee, they had 50 and 60 on their caseload.
So that's one caseworker with up to 90
Impossible.
families. 90 children.
Impossible to
Not
manage.
possible.
The social work standard is 12.
Okay.
And at 12, that probably allows you a total of 3 hours actually touching base with that child. To me, that even seems limited. Right now, they don't even have an hour, and half that, and sometimes all of that and more is used up in drive time. So we are working DCS workers to death. There was a culture survey that went out a couple of years ago, and me and Senator Campbell requested those records. And we sat down, and there were hundreds and hundreds of pages. And we sat down with some of our staff, and we all got a yellow highlighter. And then, let's really highlight some of the problems that we're seeing over and over. Mm-hmm. We had to stop. We started highlighting the things that weren't big concerns, because everything, it was, it's impossible to keep up with the paperwork. It's impossible to see the clients. Our mental health is threatened. Our physical health is being threatened because we've gone so long at this level during COVID. We can't possibly manage this. And then they have a commissioner that pits teams and people on teams against each other and threatens, if you don't get this paperwork done, you're going to be fired, and just really creates a dangerous culture where these people should be honored and respected for the hard work that they're doing, instead of pitted against each other and threatened with firing. So many are just leaving, and they're still going back to DCS, but in other states. Right. Or they're going another form of social work. It is literally create a culture created by this commissioner. DCS has always been bad. We've never had enough workers and all of that, but we have never had the kind of exodus that we are having and trying to operate. These kids are in state's custody. Mm-hmm. Bill Lee is their daddy. Yeah. I mean, he's responsible for them. Yeah. And we have kids dying in custody. We had a precious 2-year-old in Chattanooga beat to death, probably a couple of months before he was going to go back to his home. In a home that, when they finally figured out what happened, got an arrest warrant for the foster mom, went to pick her up, she shot herself in a car because she knew what she had done. And it's my understanding, I don't have the final forms in front of me and stuff, but I think she might have had more kids in the house than should have. We have kids in DCS custody that are sleeping on office floors because they don't know what to do with them. We're being told now there are facilities. I haven't seen the facilities yet, but I'm not buying it. What I'm seeing, Senator Campbell and I had a bill this last session, and it was a bill that said we would cap caseloads at 12, which is the social work standard. Right. This was done in Indiana, another red state. Indiana's results, they probably did it. Other states have done it as well, and other red states have done it. But Indiana was really the first to revamp their DCS system. And what they found is, obviously, the kids are doing better. They have more happier foster families, and the staff is happy and able to do their job. Because what you've got are people who care deeply about kids. Mm-hmm. And imagine being somebody who knows you can't get to the kids you need to get to, who knows you can't do I couldn't work under those conditions, but also leaving when I knew it was even going to make it harder. It weighs on your mental health so hard that it's also going to affect your physical health. They were saying it's affecting their own families. If you're spending 8 hours of the day working, 4 hours of the day on the road, how do you even do your own family? Right. We are expecting people who care deeply and love their job, people 2 and 3 years away from retirement, who thought they would retire from DCS, just had to leave. Yeah. It's just horrific. We are allowing kids to get into worse shape and be more abused in custody after the trauma they've already had. They put $1 billion in the rainy day fund rather than giving $16 million to our most vulnerable children.
And what does the rainy day fund cover?
It can cover, it is money that we need when things are tight and things are tough.
Okay.
And if things aren't tough and tight at DCS with children dying.
Where the fuck are they tough and tight
exactly.
at? The football stadium?
Yeah, exactly. Kids are dying.
Fabulous.
But that's not a priority. Mm-hmm. The priority is football.
And what do they think is going to happen?
Corporate bailouts or corporate tax cuts.
Right.
A perfect example. Or the budget 2 years ago, we gave a $21 million tax cut to FedEx. That was the biggest tax cut in the budget. $21 million went to FedEx, who didn't pay taxes, by the way. But they got a $21 million tax cut. The next year, they get a huge tax cut on jet fuel for their planes. At the same time, Tennessee gets a tax increase at the gas pump. So since 2017, we have cut taxes on jet fuel for corporations. And since 2017, we have raised prices at the pumps for regular Tennessee citizens 3 times. So basically, everyday Tennesseans who pay their taxes and work hard are paying more so that corporations who don't pay taxes can get a tax break on their jet fuel.
What the fuck do they think is going to happen when they make abortion illegal to these children? The money, the monetary need, even if we give it back to them because money is their motive, what happens when all of these babies are born that can't be aborted anymore?
They don't look beyond their next election. They do not look beyond their next election. They are not able to understand that decisions we make today affect our economics 5, 10, 20 years down the road. We have folks who are refusing federal dollars for pre-K in Tennessee. We know that every pre-K dollar you spend, $1 you spend, benefits in 10 years at least $10 back. We know that it is going to be a huge benefit to our economy. But yet, we don't need pre-K. It doesn't work. They took a first end of a partial study from Vanderbilt that in the middle of the study, and this one legislator carried it around in a manila folder for years, saying this is proof that pre-K doesn't work. And by the time Vanderbilt completed the entire study, pre-K absolutely works. You need a good program, and it needs to be managed well, but it absolutely works. Every educator knows that pre-K works. But they go around and say this all the time. And now this legislator has retired from the House, but now he's in the Department of Ed.
So he's still in a position of power.
Yeah. He was the one negotiating the whole TISA, which is the refunding of public ed, which is, one of the major attempts at destroying public ed.
This is alarming.
It's very alarming. And people, we need to educate people. So what you're doing is a great way for people to understand what is happening and what is behind a lot. I mean, it's hard to keep up, and it's hard. Like, when I first got involved, I ran in 2012, I guess, and they were taking away a teacher's seat at the table. They were removing collective bargaining for teachers.
Okay.
And you think, that's terrible. Why are they doing this? That's ridiculous. And then you see, and then they start all these evaluations, more and more testing. The tests are designed to make the schools look bad and make the teachers look bad. Right. Then they're evaluating the teachers based on these tests, which is making all the teachers look bad on a test that's given one day and that a teacher doesn't even get to see in advance. And base 50% of the teacher's evaluation on that one-day score. had a situation in Knoxville where a local apartment building burned. And so several families at the elementary school were having testing the next day. And they were in school because there was nowhere else for them to be because their apartment burned down. Nobody had slept all night and all of that. And these kids are taking the test. And they do poorly. Shock. But the teachers that had those kids in their room suffered because there was an apartment fire. Teachers are responsible for about 30% of what kids learn in the classroom. So much of what's going on with them is coming from home. And so they are making education look bad. They're making educators look bad so that they can privatize public education and create these charter schools or, private school options. And they're not really options. Like, no white suburban parent would send their kid to a charter school that has no music teacher, no art teacher, no PE teacher, and probably no library. Some do, some don't. I mean, we have 112 charter schools in the state of Tennessee. 38% perform below 5% success. 77% perform below 10% success. Only 5 charter schools do better than 20% success in this state. Wow. And they're pushing more and more and more. And that's where, as Governor Lee said, 90% of the kids in those charter schools are the poor community. And most of them also are Black and brown children. And these schools are not doing them any good. The scores are horrific. But they make pretty charts and graphs and act like it's a great thing to do.
But they'd like to bring 50 more.
Yeah.
So that
50 more with a different curriculum. Which with a whole different line of teaching history. Right before I came up to Nashville, there was a woman who voted the wrong way on a gun bill. And she was a Republican, and the Republicans came after her. And the NRA spent a ton of money to make sure she didn't come back, and she didn't come back. Women know that if they make a wrong move, the Republicans will take them out.
Yeah.
I mean, they do it to men too. Couple of legislators who wanted to stand up for public education, they're not there anymore because they took them out with somebody who wants to privatize public ed.
I learned that when an artist gets big and there's a threat to another musical artist of that person taking their spot, their label or whatever will spend gobs of money to create a smear campaign online so that the artist does not succeed and knock another artist out of the spot because the label's making too much money on this person versus this person. And I guess in entertainment, I can wrap my head around it because that's what we're here for. But the fact that the same game is happening in our political system is insane. Because again, these are the people that choose what happens to us.
Because it is affecting Tennessee families. And so because we have Americans for Prosperity and the NFIB, who are the two main groups that fought Medicaid expansion, right, they both take credit for making sure Medicaid expansion doesn't come to Tennessee. And that is who the legislators listen to, not the people that they represent. And money in politics is an ugly and dangerous thing. Yeah. And when you have the power, you also have the money. And that's how you grow it. And these people are not interested in good government. They have power and greed. Yeah. That's all that they care about. Yeah. And it very clearly shows on how Tennesseans, children, women, Black people, brown people, LGBTQ, everybody, quite frankly, except white men, how they're treated.
And so it's time for us to not only vote, because that is incredibly important, but also get behind the candidates we believe in, get involved in the community.
Absolutely.
I will list, obviously, a bevy of resources that I find, but I also find it interesting that there is not a space for us as regular people to go learn about each candidate prior to voting. We have to do a lot of our own legwork to figure out who to vote for. And also, as we all know, voting and the way that it works and where the ballots and it's already kind of fucked up and has an agenda to it. It's alarming to me that I have to do so much research to actually get to the facts of what a candidate believes in and what their platform is. There is no source of information.
Right. And even if a lot of times if you go to a candidate's website,
right,
they don't put a lot of information. I mean, Republicans put precious little. But even with Democrats, the more you put, they use that against you.
Right.
I do everything I can to let people know what I'm about. And like I said, I'll answer any question. If I don't know it, I'll tell you that. But the reality is at a local and state level, you have the ability to talk to the candidates. You can call up anybody running for state house or state senate or county commission and ask them to sit down with you.
Yeah.
And if they won't, don't vote for them.
Yeah.
And if they will, ask them the questions, but you have to be really smart about the questions. Like you can't say, do you support teachers? Oh, yes, I support teachers. Are you willing to raise their pay 20%?
Right.
Ask a specific question because every politician will say, oh, yes, I support teachers, but will do nothing, take no action to actually show that. And that's where you really have to. Do you support raising the wage? Oh, I think people should make more money. Are you willing to vote for a bill that raises the wage?
And historically, what have you voted for as well? That should be information we have in a database when we go to vote for someone who's running again.
In a way you do, but it's very difficult to find. I can tell you one thing for people to know. One thing the Tennessee General Assembly does well is their website. So you can go on that website and find any bill and find out how every single person voted on it. Another great thing, which is really good to go look at, is the discussion. There's the video of every time the bill came up in committee or every time the vote on the House floor. And I can give you an example of something that is just heinous. It was 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning a couple of years ago when we were voting on that heartbeat bill. And the bill had been killed. We had a debate, a discussion. The Senate wanted one budget. The House wanted the other budget. And they couldn't come to agreement. So the Senate decides, we'll give the House something they want. The House wants that heartbeat bill. They used women's health as barter to agree on the budget. They literally brought back that bill and said they would pass it if the Republican House would pass their budget. And so they brought it back, like I said, it was 1 or 2 in the morning. And there was also another bill from Rep. Jeremy Faison. And this bill was really heinous in that there's the process of the medical abortion pill. That's a 2-pill process. And what his bill required was that after taking the first pill, before the patient took the second pill, the doctor had to tell them and explain to them there was a process to reverse that. A medical process to reverse that first pill. They didn't have to go through and take the second pill. This was medical misinformation. Yeah. And so in this debate at 2 in the morning, I was not expecting this bill to come back, so I didn't have everything in front of me, but what I did know from doctors I had spoken to, there was one doctor who actually said, okay, we can do a medical trial and see if this reversal process does work. They started a medical trial, had women in the trial, testing the process, taking the drugs that they said to take. So many women went to the hospital hemorrhaging that they stopped the study. And I said on the House floor that night at 2 a.m., are you all aware of this medical study that was stopped because too many women are harmed? No, we're not aware of that. And then everybody voted yes. No intellectual curiosity about how harmful this procedure was, but they passed a law that forced doctors to give patients this information.
They don't care if any minority dies.
We're the majority.
Yeah. I mean, we are the majority, and I know that from trying to date here because I'm like, it's just all the women I know. Where are the men? I mean, the children, once they're born, don't matter. The bodies with which they're born from don't matter. It's especially so in the case of people of color.
Yeah. Maternal mortality for Black women is far and above white women, and we're doing nothing to address that. We're not expanding Medicaid, which would address that.
And when is this Medicaid expansion? When can we be involved in that process?
We could do it tomorrow. We could have that's the thing about Medicaid expansion. With Biden just increased the funding. He just said, for every state who takes it now, you can have the first 2 years free. Plus, you can have this additional $80 million or some crazy amount of money, which covers the extra it would be for the next 10 years. And they're saying no. Tennessee tax dollars coming back to Tennessee, and they won't take it.
So did they officially have voted no, or it's just a constant discussion that can be moved?
We continually bring up a bill, and they vote it down. Yeah. They really don't want to talk about it. And there were a lot of activists for a long time talking about it. And that's how we changed it from being 40% positive to now 70% positive. So now Republicans think it's a no-brainer. And but these extremists in Nashville are not doing it. And they want to do everything they can to avoid a conversation.
Right.
I was just at a meeting where some organizations that know how important Medicaid expansion is were afraid to say so because the commissioner of substance abuse and mental health was there, and they knew that saying anything supportive of Medicaid expansion would get them angry, and they might rip the funds they're already giving.
The commissioner of mental health would be angry if we had more money for people's mental health.
Yes, because she stood there and said, we're not refusing anybody any mental health care. She said, anybody who shows up can get care. There are a whole lot of people who don't show up because they don't think they can get care. They don't have insurance. They think, how can I afford it?
Right.
So they don't show up. But she just flat out lied when it came to substance abuse because those people can't get a bed. They can't.
No, there are no beds.
And she sort of halfway admitted she was wrong there. And she said, here's a number that anybody can call and nobody will be refused.
That's not possible.
The number was Mobile Crisis.
Okay. Mobile
Crisis is a number that you call when somebody is literally a danger to themselves or others right now.
Right, and they get what, $51.50 for 48 hours?
And yeah, so I mean, it's not an answer. No. And we had someone with substance abuse call that number, and they said we can't help you. So it's a lie. And we have something out there. It's not the cure-all, be-all, and end-all Medicaid expansion. Right. But it would increase exponentially what we already have.
Right.
And what people can have access to.
And people's citizens that are against it. Why? They think their taxes are going to get raised?
Well, some people think that, but most people understand it and support it. The majority of people on both sides of the aisle are now supportive. But this group of MAGA Republicans will not even discuss it. The speaker calls it socialism. And they want to make people pay because they should have skin in the game. These people have got skin in the game. Most of these people are working low-wage jobs with no benefits. Probably working more hours than our speaker's working, quite frankly.
Well, I mean, it's a bunch of products of nepotism telling other people to get out there and work and stop being lazy. Like, you don't.
Right.
We
even had one senator tell a constituent, "Oh, I don't have health insurance." She said, "You've got health insurance through the state." "Oh, I don't have health insurance through the state." Well, come to find out, he had like 5 different health insurance.
Of course.
And yes, he had health insurance through the state. He wasn't even aware. Of course. Because of his privilege.
Right. He doesn't have to know. And that's that is not representing the people that live in this state or the people that live in this country.
Yeah. Sometimes I think that they don't ever go outside of their Republican meetings
They don't.
and their church.
They don't.
You know, I live in East Tennessee. I deal with Republicans all day long. I hear all sides all the time. I live with my family. They're mostly all Republicans. So we have these conversations all the time.
Yeah.
And I see a variety of people. I live in a world with all kinds.
Yeah.
And I just think that they prevent themselves from ever seeing anything different.
Well, they can because they're privileged, because this country was built for them. So they don't have to be faced with what's going on outside of them and their immediate circle.
Right.
And I don't want anyone making decisions for me who only goes places and talks to people that make them right about their extreme beliefs.
Right.
That's incredibly scary, but the lack of emotional intelligence just compounds on everything else. And then we have these fucking power hungry psychopaths making our choices for us.
Right. Right. Absolutely.
I don't think so.
It is a fact. We have made women second-class citizens and taken away their own bodies.
Yeah, I saw that rhetoric as well, where it's like, okay, well, this is what you Democrats want. You want the power back to the people. Now it's in the states. Our states are riddled with representatives, like I said earlier, that
don't care if we live or die.
That are gerrymandering, and they're just as fucked up as the federal situation. Yeah. So it's not, you're not giving the power to the people in any fair way. And if we had known that our autonomy was on the table, perhaps we would have bothered to dig for information that should be readily available on some of the people we voted for. But again, nobody in their regular day-to-day life is thinking about who they're voting for at a state level. I'm sorry. Like, they're only concerned, especially these younger generations. We just pick a president, we whine on Twitter, and then we move on about our day. So the people that are representing me in this state are not power to my people. I don't feel empowered and safe now that you've taken away my federal protection.
Right. And you know, people think sometimes that at a local level, well, my county commissioner, you know, he's a nice guy. He's a Republican, but he's my neighbor and he's a nice guy. I can vote for him. That's different. If you vote for that Republican for county commissioner, he's going to get some notoriety over his term. The next he'll run for state house. And then next he'll run for Congress. And you have created this person who's going to go along with their machine, regardless of how insane and crazy it is, and fascist, quite frankly. They're going to go along because they want to keep that position that they see as power, and often find a way to make money using that position.
The same way that we get so mad at celebrities because the bigger they get, the more corrupt they become, and we have this intense judgment of celebrities and how they should be doing everything, and then we just let whoever run the country. Yeah. We just don't really
and no matter what side of the aisle you're on, your values can get corrupted, and I've watched that. Mm-hmm. I've seen exactly how it happens. I used to be on the health committee when I first came to the legislature, and with the health committee, all the arguments are kind of scope of practice, like the ophthalmologist and the optometrist. The optometrist wants a little more practice, and the ophthalmologist thinks, well, they're getting into my practice now. We're gonna fight on this bill. Mm-hmm. And so we had a bill that was like that between ophthalmologists and optometrists. So I called every optometrist I knew and every ophthalmologist I knew, and neither would back off their side. Mm-hmm. And then I started calling nurses, and I was like, well, should an optometrist be able to actually cut? And, you know, and it's really hard to get somebody to step away from their side. And finally, I made my decision based on the fact that if I'm getting my eye cut on, I want to go to an ophthalmologist. And why would I choose less for anybody else?
Right.
And so that was what I ultimately based my decision on. Well, when it came the day for committee, and even, you know, people were like, oh, well, Gloria, I said, I've got another bill. I'm here. I'm voting this way. Just because I wanted to let them know, because they all asked. And I said, but I've got a bill coming up. And Ed, if I have to leave, you know, I'm leaving because I've got a bill that's up. Because when you get at the end of session, like, you have to be 15 places. And when you have a bill, you just got to leave to go run your bill. And, you just go sit over there. You don't need to stay here. You can just go sit over there and run your education bill and not worry about missing it. So in my head, I was like, well, that's an easy way to get out of that decision.
Yeah.
And then I went, holy shit, I'm trying to get out of a tough situation that I was sent here to do.
Right.
And I could see, I was thinking to myself, if I had done that, taken the easy way out, it just would have made it easier to do it again and easier to do it again.
Yeah.
And for me, all I could think was, these people sent me here. And yes, whenever you make a vote, you're going to tick off some people and you're going to make some people happy. But you've got to vote on the information that you have, and you have to get the best information you can get. And I did that. And I stayed and I made that vote. And too many times, I think people are making those other decisions. And the more you compromise on those choices, the easier it gets every time. I think that we are in a place right now where doctors don't understand the full implications. That's the thread that I'm on with the physicians, was DNC specifically. They are afraid. So what they're thinking is someone will wait to do something like that when it's needed, out of fear of becoming a felon and going to prison.
Right.
And so our law that was written, I mean, these guys, they're not the sharpest knives in the drawer, and they don't fill in the details. Therefore, it's gray area. It's up to interpretation. And what it does is the same with the bill, the anti-CRT bill that we're not teaching. That it's just a chilling effect on teachers being afraid to teach anything about race, because it could be determined that it was X, Y, or Z. And so doctors, it's a chilling effect on physicians. Like, this patient needs a DNC. Maybe they could survive without it, but if I do this, will I go to prison? So it puts a chilling effect on any procedure. Actually, I think there's a bill that's already gone through the House. They're holding it up in the Senate, of course.
Yeah.
Because we've got that problem with the majority, supermajority, all of that kind of, or do we have 60? Do we have 50? That sort of a thing. But we just write the law that gives women access to abortion up until whenever. Roe covered, of course, you can't abort a fetus that is viable. That's not acceptable. That was a Republican talking point. They always acted like this is something that was happening, and it absolutely wasn't. Those late-term abortions were always just horrific situations.
Right.
Where nobody decorates the nursery and decides to have an abortion. These people wanted those babies and something went horribly wrong. And I have a couple of friends who lived through that, and it was so traumatic for them. And they would have died if something wasn't done. And so nobody is out there decorating a nursery and then deciding to have an abortion. It absolutely doesn't exist. And it's very frustrating that they try to use it, but they have constantly lied, and we know this.
Right.
And we've proven it over and over. Right. Those are our talking points that help their side, but there's nothing factual about them. I don't think there are right now. However, I expect them to write something like that in this next session. I don't expect them to end it where they ended it. Mm-hmm. And I fear that greatly. It is terrifying to me that they will try to, to me, it's holding people against their will in a state. Constitutionally, I don't see how you can do it. The Supreme Court has printed on it equal under the law. We're no longer equal under the law. And so why would they stop taking away more rights? I think they're going to try anything. And we have to be vigilant, and we have to be loud, and we have to be upfront, and we have to be at Legislative Plaza, and we need to be every event that's on their calendar speaking up. I saw a great thing where Governor Lee was at some athletic event or something in Chattanooga, and a woman was following him around asking him about Roe. And that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that they can't go anywhere where they're not getting questioned about what they're doing.
Well, we really appreciate you coming here
Absolutely.
today. I can't believe you responded to me on Twitter. Is there anything else that you want to highlight before we wrap it up?
No, just that you can find out how everybody votes on the Tennessee General Assembly website. As we head into the next session after the election in November, people will start writing bills. The Tennessee General Assembly has a great bill tracker. So you can go and search all the bills on the topics that you're interested in, and then get them on your bill tracker, and it'll come up in your RSS feed when the bill's moving. Like, okay, next week your bill's going to subcommittee, or next week your bill's going to full committee. And that way you can call the people that you want to call who are on the committee, or, so it's just a great way to track what's happening, what bills are coming up that you care about, so that you can take action. So teaching people just about that website. And also the other one is the Tennessee Campaign Finance website, where you can search any elected official's finance. I think that's also really critical information to have.
Yeah, I'll be putting that on the end of this video, because I saw a TikTok that went viral, and he did it at a federal level. But it's amazing, the people that were voting for anti-gun control are all the people that are getting millions from the NRA. So,
and the federal, I think, is much harder to track than the state.
He found it. He's amazing.
You can track it, but it's a lot more complicated to understand. The state stuff, I got money from these people, I spent money on this.
Yeah.
Really quickly tells you all you need to know.
Great. I can't wait to have someone else make an Excel spreadsheet for me. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. I will put some resources there, here, everywhere. Thank you. Bye.